The remote community of Mintabie is taking the state government to federal court. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heiser here. I've got my Stein ready, and I thought we'd talk about Mintabie. Now, Mintabie is a remote community in the middle of Australia, in northern South Australia. If you have a look at the image I've got up there, you can see how isolated this community is. It's a little opal mining town that's been there for quite a while. Now, Mintabie made headlines in the last few years just because of all of the issues that were apparently happening in the town. Now, I went through this report. This is a government report written by a previous Labor government there that is very critical of the town, and particularly the treatment of the local Indigenous people there. Or the town was a gateway to gangs and violence and those type of things. So I did a video on it, and I was a bit dubious about it because the community in Mintabie are being kicked out of the town. They're being removed off the land. And what I did after I made that video, I was approached to do an interview by Stephanie Cairns. Now, she did she lives in Mintabie, lived with her children there. Her husband is a opal miner, like a lot of the people, and she really was quite critical of what happened in that report, understandably, because it's all only one-sided. It's politically motivated, and she shared some insights into what it was like living in a town like that. And frankly, having had a chat with her, it seemed very appealing to me too. I can understand why people are going there. So if you want to get a bit of an understanding of the background of what we're going to be talking about today, have a look at these two videos. First, the one going through the report. If you want to do it yourself, there's a link to it in that video description, or the interview with Stephanie. And I'd recommend that one, frankly, because it really gives you a human insight into what's going on here. So let's have a look at this article from ABC News. Now, Mintabie, so the Mintabie community launches federal court legal action against the South Australian government weeks out from eviction. So they're getting evicted. Now, what do you mean they're getting evicted? They're getting evicted. They bought the rights to kind of occupy that land. Every year it's kind of treated like a campground. And they've built houses there. They've built a community there. There was a school there. There's even footage where local school students made videos about just the experience of living out in that community. And it was fantastic. It really is good to see. So I must admit, talking to Stephanie and seeing what it's like out there, I can see a lot of advantages just to getting out of the hustle and bustle of the city and, imagine just being under the stars in the middle of the country. So residents of a South Australian outback town who are weeks away from being evicted have launched a large-ditch legal effort to prevent the community from closing. Mintabie, in the state's remote far north, was condemned by a report released by the former South Australian Labor government. The report found the town of about 30 permanent residents to be a hub of drug and alcohol running into Aboriginal communities into APY land. Now, that's something that we need to take into consideration here, because this is a very remote area. I mean, you can see here how far away it is from anything. So up here in the top left, that's the APY land, and that's the Aboriginal land, the kind of body corporate organisation with a couple thousand people that has control over all of this land. Now, just because this town happens to be a gateway into there, they're assuming rather than dealing with the problems, they're just going to shut down the town. Now, do you think that will actually stop any criminal element from going through the town or using it? Or do you think it will just shut up the witnesses and get rid of them? Because Stephanie shared some quite sad stories where, she has to go back to South Australia and her husband needs to stay in the town because it's getting ransacked at night by gangs, because they've been told they can go there and grab whatever they want from the abandoned houses. So we'll go back to this report. It was also highly critical of local businesses' use of the book up credit scheme, where customers would leave their bank cards with store owners in order to pay for goods. Okay, that sounds bad, but you have to think about it. If you're in a remote community like this and you've got no access to anything else, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You don't have access to it. The town is the bank. Your partner's maybe drunk everything away. There's social issues in the community, and you want to feed your kids. What are you going to do? So You know, one person can paint it bad, another person can paint it as a way of helping the local community. So it's not ideal, but these things never are black and white. Mintabie locals have disputed many of the report's findings. Earlier this year, opal miner Kevin Davies, a local of 10 years, said he was shocked to find out about plans to close the town in the media. Yeah, that's the thing. They found out about it in the media. In the media. The South Australian Liberal government chose to proceed with the town's closure when it came to power last year. The land has been leased to the government by APY land executives for the purpose of opal mining since 1980. But the town existed before APY lands. Okay? And if you read the report, if you read the report here of what they proposed to actually get the Indigenous Australians to do on there, it seems quite disturbing. They want, or childish really. They say, oh, they can, remediate the town, do repair work, all these other things. They don't want to turn it into an opal mining town. And this is one of the few sources of opals in the world, and this is worth potentially significant money. My criticisms are that they're, instead of using this to generate wealth for the local community, try and get people out of living in lower socioeconomic bands and just being caretakers of the land, why don't you develop the mining infrastructure there? Why don't you look at creating more jobs? Why don't you look at technological advances in your communities that are living out there? Then maybe you wouldn't have all of these social issues. Maybe I'm being naive. So, Mintabie has been an opal field for more than 40 years, but an independent review found income had decreased significantly in recent years. Yes, it had. Now, are they also saying that there's potentially billions of dollars worth of opals in the ground, which is highlighted in the report, where some infrastructure investment could allow better access to that? No, ABC didn't report on that. Maybe they did later. I don't think they do. The agreement will end, and the land is expected to be handed back to APY lands in July, but legal action threatened to derail that from happening. Well, yes, I've got no problem with that. What are they going to do with the land? Why? The last time I read about this, the leader of the APY lands was over on holiday in New Zealand, and there are only a couple of thousand people living there, and you cannot access APY lands unless you have a specific permit. So me as a white Australian, I can't go on that land, the whole portion of the country, and this is a huge section of the nation. I can't go on there unless I have a permit. So how is that? How is that? The legal argument. The Mintabie Miners Progress Association lodged documents with the federal court against the South Australian government, with the first hearing to be held on May 24th. That's in 2 days from recording this. MMPA lawyer Todd Grant said the argument had two elements. The APY Act, we would say, and of course it is for the court to determine in due course, is no longer a valid act, Mr. Grant said. It is in breach of the Racial Discrimination Act in that anyone who is not an APY person is discriminated against in terms of entry or living on the land. Okay? So let's just think about that. There's a portion of our country that you are not allowed to live on or even enter based on your race. Based on your race. Okay? We're all meant to be Australians. Race is just meant to be inconsequential, something you can't really have control over, but it's used now to dictate your access to a huge chunk of land here in Australia. You couldn't even be a tourist there if you want. Just think about this. Think about the people living in that community. If you wanted to have some innovation, if you wanted to create a tourist town, what are you gonna do? Not just in Mintabie, but in the other remote communities up further north. I mean, let's have a look here at some of it. I'll just, here's Mintabie, and you've got some of the other towns up here. What if you wanted to create some tourism? What if you wanted to create some innovation? But a big chunk of this area here, this much of the state, you can't go in unless you're part of the tribe. So what's that tell you? To me, that screams hyper-conservatism. No innovation. The young members need permission from the elders or anything. You can't even set up a campground. You can't even create innovation. You can't even create business. It's insane. So you're just pandering to the government when they appear and maybe putting on a few arts and crafts and selling them on the internet. But it just, to me, it just does not resonate well, and it seems very, very much like the nanny state and the government, and we'll take care of you. So yeah, I hope that the Racial Discrimination Act is used to address this, because otherwise the law is pointless. Otherwise the act isn't working, and you are trapping a large group of people into living a tribal historical way, which fantastic. Okay, let's laugh at that and pretend that's good, but your quality of life isn't as good, your healthcare isn't as good, your life expectancy isn't as good. I mean, come on, guys. No, we've got to advance our civilization as one people. And little things like this, the lefts are going, oh, it's all nice, good. I'm not a fan. And I think a lot of Australians wouldn't be a fan either if they realised it. So this would also include other Aboriginal groups, perhaps. The second part is that the APY Act impedes free movement between the states. Well, yeah, it does. But he said there was room for compromise, despite negotiations between the parties breaking down. There's always hope for negotiation that doesn't involve litigation, Mr. Grant said. Wow, I never thought I'd hear a lawyer saying that. Oh yeah, no, okay, that's unfair. Most of what lawyers do is negotiation. Litigation is always the last resort. We like to take a jab at lawyers, but they're tough enough. They can handle it, okay? And they get paid enough to cop it. They get paid enough. He said the aims of legal action were clear: to allow certainly a significantly more lengthy period for residents to stay, and if they do have to leave, more time in order to be able to plan. Well, yeah, they were given insignificant notice. The school was shut down from December to January, and that's, you can hear Stephanie's residents' experience of that, because it is quite unfair, really. It is quite unfair. It is incredibly remote. It's not like moving suburbs. No, it's not. The nearest major town is Cooper Pedy, and it's 230 kilometres away. APY Land General Manager Richard King said he was totally bemused by the argument of the MMPA. Really? Wow. It's a bit rich to say that people who have lived here for 50,000 years have no right to the land, Mr. King said. No, he's not saying that. You've lived there for 50,000 years. Well, you probably haven't. You're probably living in New Zealand. There's 2,000 people living there. What have they done with the land? They weren't farming out back there, okay? They weren't building permanent settlements out back there. This is the middle of Australia. They would have been, if it wasn't for Western colonization, nothing would have happened out there. Nothing would have happened. They'd reached the pinnacle of civilization in a desert, and they'd done an amazing job to survive like that. But that was it. You can't take a technological leap. You don't have the harbors, you don't have the temperature, you don't have the climate, you don't have the access to farming, just getting metal and resources and trade in the remotest part, the middle of a continent that's a desert. Anyway, this is like the second taking of Anagu land. Oh, come on, mate. Come on, stop it. He's just being political. No one would seek to disadvantage Aboriginal people more than the Mintabie community already have. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? The problem is that you have people and other Aboriginals coming in to Mintabie and then selling to people from APY land, selling them banged up crappy cars at hyperinflated prices, and these poor people living in the middle of nowhere have got no idea that they're getting ripped off. You've got people bringing drugs and selling it to them. You've got people bringing alcohol and selling it to them. It's not the Mintabie people. It's other people coming into that community. And sometimes people from other tribes as well. Okay? Because here's a secret little thing. Everyone's an asshole, no matter what race or group you are. They're bastards in every group. Okay? Politicians, I think, are the worst. He said API locals have been disempowered by the Mintabie community. Oh, come on. When's the last time you were there, mate? You still on holiday? It just reeks and tells you why Mintabie has to go. Oh, yeah. Let's watch my interview to hear from an actual local who lives there, because he's just politically posturing. And they haven't mentioned the fact there's a whole lot of in this article. They have not mentioned the fact that there is significant resources in this area that could be developed. And there's other people claiming that there's, potential oil and gas reserves around the area and other coal reserves, and maybe that's why they want to get, all of it into APY control. I haven't really looked into that. That seems a bit too conspiratorial for me, but sometimes it is the way it is. The minister responsible for the town's closure, South Australian Mining Minister Dan Van Holst, declined to comment. Well, there you go. So guys, what do you think about this? Do you think this is fair? Do you think this ABC article is fair? I think it only presents one side of the story. And I really feel bad for the people of Mintabie. I think they're losing out in the end. And, these are just normal, Australians living in the town, getting kicked out. It's not fair. It's not fair. Any of the claims that Richard's making, it's just political pandering. Because if in the report they were happy to have the elderly people living in, then they all change their mind. And what are they going to do to the town? Nothing. They're going to do nothing. They'll get paid by the government to clean it up when politicians visit. Otherwise, it'll just be ransacked and abandoned. You're destroying a community. So you can't claim that you're being persecuted when you're not brave enough to assume the high road and say, we lost our land this many times, the community's been this, but we'll show you how to do it right. We will allow them to stay here for this period. We'll work together. Nah, it's just politics, politicking, victim blaming. Yeah, not impressed. Anyway, guys, please like, share, and subscribe. Ding the bell to see my daily updates, and I'll talk to all again tomorrow. Bye for now.